Hello and welcome to Patient Power. I'm Andrew Schorr. I am a big believer in clinical trials. I've been in 2 of them, and certainly the one for leukemia, the first one, I think helped save my life. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, of course. You're not always benefiting from the clinical research because it may not pan out. But it's something increasingly we cancer patients have to consider. Joining me from the big ASCO meeting in Chicago is Dr. Tom Baer. Dr. Baer is a clinical leader at the Knight Cancer Institute in Portland, Oregon at Oregon Health and Science University, and he's written a book about understanding clinical trials. Dr. Baer, thank you so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Wouldn't you agree that clinical research is really a partnership between physician researchers and patients?
Absolutely.
You wrote this book that I mentioned. Tell us about it.
Well, the book's title is very simple. It's Cancer Clinical Trials. And after having talked to more than 1,000 men with prostate cancer about clinical trials over the last dozen years or so, I've really come to appreciate how difficult it is in the hour or two that we have together in the clinic to transmit all the knowledge that I think folks need to have to make good decisions for themselves. And so I ended up teaming up with Larry Axmaker, who's a patient, a cancer survivor, and a participant in 3 clinical trials, to write a book that really intends to demystify the world of cancer clinical trials for patients, their families, and loved ones, and the folks that are helping them make decisions for their cancer care.
Dr. Baer, where does participation in a clinical trial fit in for a patient? Give us an example.
Well, I think advanced prostate cancer is an excellent example of what's going on in cancer research and what cancer research can do. Until 2004, we had no drugs that extended survival. We then got 1 drug, and in the last 2 years, 5 additional drugs have been shown to lengthen the lives of men with advanced prostate cancer. All of this work has, of course, involved thousands of volunteer patients in large national and often international clinical trials. So I think certainly in prostate cancer in recent years, we've seen an explosion of progress, and it couldn't have happened without men willing to volunteer and their families supporting them in that choice.
As you know, some people are hesitant to participate in a clinical trial. There's a fear they'll be a guinea pig and they just will not get the benefit. Tell us about your view of that.
I think many people are reluctant to consider clinical trials because these kinds of concerns are still quite common. In our book, we really address that head on. It's important for people to know that clinical trials in cancer are designed with a great deal of oversight and review, both by scientific committees and regulatory bodies. In fact, the care people receive on a cancer clinical trial is more tightly supervised than routine cancer care, with more people watching over the patient's outcome to make sure that things are being done right. There's no question that there are unknowns. That's why these are clinical trials, and we don't have all the answers in advance, but they're designed thoughtfully, carefully, and with a great deal of oversight, with ethical principles that make sure that if there is a highly effective treatment available, people are not missing out on that.
With so much cancer news coming out, for instance, at the ASCO meeting where you are, do you feel today it's the responsibility of the cancer patient to find out about clinical trials and consider participating in one?
Sure. Yeah, I think we live in an era of increasingly informed cancer patients who are taking greater responsibility for their healthcare decisions. And that's, I think, critically important and a huge advantage to those patients who choose to take that approach. The field is moving extremely rapidly, and for any given individual doctor, while they can have a lot of expertise and there's no substitute for a doctor, nobody's going to think about one's cancer as much as the patient, him or herself. So the patient can really scour the universe for clinical trial opportunities and novel treatments at a depth that no physician possibly could. Furthermore, many medical decisions are very personal, and people need to be a part of them. There's not always a black and white right answer, so to speak, that a doctor can provide, and an informed, well-educated patient is far better positioned to make those kinds of decisions. I think when a person gets diagnosed with cancer, they ought to read 2 or 3 books, 1 or 2 books about their particular cancer, and also a book about cancer clinical trials, because experimental therapy can be an option all throughout the care continuum for cancer. You know, a lot of people think that clinical trials are something you don't even begin to think about until all standard options are exhausted, and that's not right. Many cancer treatments can be improved upon, including those that are so-called frontline treatments, and there's often opportunities to consider a clinical trial early as well as late in the course of cancer care. So I think every patient with cancer owes it to themselves to have knowledge about what clinical trials are all about and how they might think about them for themselves.
What do you hope people will come away with after reading your book?
I think the main thing I hope that people come away with from reading this book is a level of comfort and understanding. I'd like people to have a level of knowledge that makes them confident in making good decisions for themselves. That may or may not involve choosing to be a part of a clinical trial in any given situation. I don't think a clinical trial is always the answer, but to be fully informed about one's options, one has to know what clinical trials are all about. So I hope that we dispel some of the anxiety and uncertainty and give people the knowledge they need to make good decisions for themselves.
Thank you for joining us.
I really appreciate the chance to talk with you today.
I wholeheartedly agree with Dr. Baer. It is certainly important to become knowledgeable about clinical trials for the diagnosis you have. It could make even a life-saving difference. For Patient Power, I'm Andrew Schorr. Remember, knowledge can be the best medicine of all.